The Book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World, by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, with Douglas Abrams. Introduction. Imagine two old friends, meeting at a small airport tucked away in the foothills of the Himalayas. One is in the deep maroon and saffron robes of a Tibetan monk. The other wears the purple shirt and white collar of an Anglican archbishop. As they see each other, their faces break into wide, childlike smiles. They embrace, not with the formal distance of world leaders, but with the genuine, tender affection of brothers. The archbishop gently touches the monk's cheeks, and the monk purses his lips, as if blowing him a kiss. These aren't just any two friends. They are His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, two of the most revered spiritual figures of our time. And this meeting, this week-long conversation in Dharamshala, India, was a gift to the world. A project born out of a simple, yet profound question. In a world filled with so much suffering, how is it possible to live a life of joy? This isn't a theoretical question for these men. The Dalai Lama has lived in exile for over half a century, forced to flee his homeland of Tibet under the threat of violence. The Archbishop lived through and fought against the brutal, soul-crushing system of apartheid in South Africa. They have witnessed the worst of humanity: oppression, violence, hatred, and loss. And yet, they are two of the most joyful, mischievous, and laughter-filled people on the planet. How? That single question is the heart of the Book of Joy. It's a book that has sold millions of copies around the world, not because it offers easy answers, but because it offers a roadmap, a blueprint for finding lasting happiness that isn't dependent on what happens to us, but on what happens within us. Over the next few minutes, we're going to journey with them into that week of dialogue. We will uncover the true nature of joy, explore the obstacles that stand in our way, and most importantly, we will learn the 8 pillars of joy, 4 qualities of the mind and 4 qualities of the heart that, together, can transform our lives from the inside out. This isn't just a summary, it's an invitation to discover that joy is not a fleeting feeling, but a way of being. And by the end of our time together, you will hold the keys to cultivating that joy in your own life, no matter the storms you face. Book summary. Our story begins with a scene that beautifully captures the spirit of these two men. They were once scheduled to give a talk together, and just as they were about to walk on stage, in front of all the cameras, the Dalai Lama, this global icon of peace, playfully pretended to choke his spiritual brother. Without missing a beat, the Archbishop turned to him and whispered, "Hey, the cameras are on us. Act like a holy man." They both erupted in laughter. This story is more than just a funny anecdote. It's a key that unlocks the central message of the book. What we think a holy person is, serious, severe, reserved, is the opposite of what these two embody. They teach us that true spiritual depth isn't found in solemnity, but in lightness, in humility, and in a profound sense of humor. The path to joy is not about renouncing our humanity, but embracing it in all its beautiful, messy, and often ridiculous glory. The first great lesson they share is the crucial difference between happiness and joy. The Archbishop explains it with a powerful image: a mother giving birth. She knows she is about to face immense pain, something most of us spend our lives trying to avoid. Yet she accepts it. And the moment her child is born, after hours of excruciating labor, the joy she feels is immeasurable. It's a joy that comes through suffering, not in spite of it. This, they tell us, is the nature of true joy. Happiness is often dependent on external circumstances. We're happy when we get a promotion, when we fall in love, when the weather is nice. But what happens when we lose the job, when the relationship ends, when the storm clouds roll in? Happiness is fleeting. Joy, on the other hand, is an inner state. It's a way of being that is not shaken by the highs and lows of life. As the Archbishop says, joy is much bigger than happiness. It's a deep sense of well-being that comes from within, a sense of satisfaction and meaning that endures even in the face of hardship. The Dalai Lama agrees. He explains that for years, scientists have been trying to understand what creates lasting well-being, and they found that it doesn't come from money, or power, or fame. He speaks of his billionaire friends who are deeply unhappy. Lasting happiness, he says, is not found in any external achievement. It resides only in the human mind and heart. This leads us to the book's great paradox. The path to joy often leads directly through suffering. When the Archbishop asks the Dalai Lama the question that is on everyone's mind, "You've been in exile for 56 years. Why are you not morose?" The Dalai Lama's answer is stunning. He doesn't deny his pain. He doesn't pretend it doesn't exist. Instead, he reveals a profound mental technique. He references an ancient Buddhist master, Shantideva, who taught a simple, logical approach to tragedy. If something can be done about the situation, Shantideva wrote, what need is there for dejection? And if nothing can be done about it, what use is there for being dejected? It sounds almost too simple, but the Dalai Lama explains how he puts this into practice. When he thinks only of his own country, of the suffering of the Tibetan people, he feels worry. But then, he widens his perspective. He looks at the whole world and sees that there are so many other people suffering. Muslim communities in China, people facing war and poverty all over the globe. He doesn't do this to minimize his own pain by comparing it to others. He does it to unite his pain with others. He realizes he is not alone. This shift from my suffering to our suffering is the birthplace of empathy and compassion. And in that connection, his own personal anguish is reduced. This is a recurring theme in the book. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. The Buddha taught this with the metaphor of the two arrows. When something painful happens, an injury, a loss, an insult, that is the first arrow. We cannot avoid it. But then comes the second arrow, our reaction to the pain. It's the sorrow, the grief, the anger, the self-pity. This second arrow, the suffering, is something we shoot at ourselves. The Dalai Lama suggests that by shifting our perspective, we can learn to avoid that second arrow. But he goes even further. He says that losing his country, as tragic as it was, also gave him new opportunities. If he had remained in the Potala Palace in Lhasa, he would have been in a golden cage. As a refugee, he was free to meet people from all walks of life, scientists, other spiritual leaders, ordinary people. He says, personally, I prefer the last 5 decades of refugee life. It's more useful, more opportunity to learn, to experience life. He transforms a tragedy into a gift. This is not about pretending something bad is actually good. It's about looking at the same event from every possible angle until you find the one that empowers you. As he says, there's a Tibetan saying, wherever you have friends, that's your country, and wherever you receive love, that's your home. The Archbishop echoes this sentiment, drawing on the life of Nelson Mandela. When Mandela went to prison, he was an angry young man, the head of the armed wing of his party. He spent 27 years in a tiny cell, performing senseless hard labor. Many would call that a waste, but the Archbishop says those 27 years were necessary. They were the fire that burned away the dross, the anger and hatred, and transformed him into a man of immense magnanimity and compassion. His suffering ennobled him, rather than embittering him. The lesson is profound. Suffering is not a roadblock to joy. It is the very path. Nothing beautiful in the end comes without a measure of some pain, the Archbishop explains. This is how our universe has been made up. But how do we walk this path? How do we face the pain without being consumed by it? The Dalai Lama shares a powerful story. He was once on his way to a hospital in excruciating pain from what turned out to be a gallbladder issue. The journey was hours long. As he drove, he passed through one of the poorest states in India. He saw shoeless children, and then, under a hut, a sick, dying old man, completely alone. As he focused on this man's suffering, a wave of compassion washed over him, and he completely forgot about his own pain. He explains, by simply shifting my focus to another person, which is what compassion does, my own pain was much less intense. This is what he calls wise selfishness. Foolish selfishness is thinking only of yourself, which leads to isolation and misery. Wise selfishness is realizing that taking care of others, helping others, is the best way to discover your own joy. This idea forms the foundation for what the Dalai Lama calls mental immunity. Just as we build physical immunity to protect ourselves from viruses, we can build mental immunity to protect ourselves from destructive emotions. This isn't about suppressing our feelings. It's about understanding how our mind works. Some thoughts and emotions are toxic. They disturb our peace and cause us pain. Others are healing. They bring us joy. Mental immunity is the practice of learning to avoid the destructive emotions and cultivate the positive ones. It takes time, like building muscle. When your mental health is strong, small problems cause some distress, but you recover quickly. When it's weak, even small disturbances can send you into a spiral of fear, worry, and anger. This brings us to the great obstacles to joy, the inner demons we all face. The first is fear, stress, and anxiety. The Archbishop reminds us that fear is a natural survival mechanism. It's what stops you from walking merrily up to a lion. The problem is when fear becomes exaggerated, when it's provoked by things that are insignificant. The Dalai Lama adds that so much of our stress comes from unrealistic expectations and ambitions. We want something, and when we don't get it, we feel frustration. We're not being realistic about our own abilities or about the reality of the situation. The key is to see things as they are, not as we wish they were. The second obstacle is frustration and anger. The Dalai Lama points out that fear and anger are very closely linked. They are two poles of our fight or flight response. He tells a funny story about his old car mechanic in Tibet. The man was working under the car and banged his head on the fender. He got so mad that he stood up and started banging his head against the car again and again, on purpose. This, the Dalai Lama says, is anger. It's foolish. It only inflicts more pain on ourselves. Instead of reacting with anger, he advises us to use our analytical minds. Why did this happen? What will be the result of my anger? You quickly realize it's not helpful. The Archbishop adds that there is a place for righteous anger, which is usually not about ourselves, but about seeing others being harmed. It's a tool of compassion, not a reactive emotion. Next comes sadness and grief. In our culture, we often see sadness as the enemy of joy. We try to suppress it, to cheer up, but the Archbishop argues that this is a mistake. He tells of the first day of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, when a man was testifying about being tortured. The man broke down, unable to speak, and began to weep. The Archbishop, sitting as the chairman, joined him. He felt ashamed at first, thinking he had made a public spectacle of himself. But he came to realize that to hold down emotions is not wise. Sadness is what connects us. He says, we don't really get close to others if our relationship is made up of unending hunky-doriness. It is the hard times that knit us more closely together. Grief, a psychologist friend of the author explains, is the reminder of the depth of our love. Without love, there is no grief. So, when we feel that ache, it's actually a beautiful reminder of the love that was, and still is, there. Then there is despair, especially the despair we feel when we look at the state of the world: war, starvation, terrorism. The most asked question from people around the world for this book was, how can I find joy in the midst of such large world problems? The Archbishop's answer is to look again. Yes, we are capable of awful atrocities, but we also have a fantastic capacity for goodness. He points to Doctors Without Borders, people who leave comfortable lives to go into the most dangerous, poverty-stricken places. For every act of violence, there are countless acts of kindness. The Dalai Lama adds that the news media gives us a distorted view. Millions of children are loved by their parents every day. Millions of people receive immense care in hospitals. But this is so common it isn't news. We must keep a more holistic view. He also shares a powerful practice called Tonglen, or giving and taking. When protests erupted in Tibet in 2008 and the Chinese authorities responded with violence, he felt helpless. So, in his meditation, he visualized the Chinese officials. He breathed in their fear, their anger, their suspicion, and he breathed out his love and forgiveness. It didn't change the situation on the ground, but it kept his own mind calm and compassionate, preventing him from falling into despair. Another obstacle is loneliness. We live in the most connected time in history, yet we are lonelier than ever. The Dalai Lama says this comes from our materialistic culture, which treats us like machines, and from our focus on secondary differences, my nation, my religion, my race. When we focus on these, we create walls. But when we relate to others on the first level, the human level, there are no barriers. He says, no need for introduction. Same human face. You can smile and say hello. This is the heart of the African concept of Ubuntu, which the Archbishop explains as, a person is a person through other persons. We are not created for independence, but for interdependence. We belong in a delicate network. We can only be human together. Finally, there is envy, the feeling that arises when that person drives past in their fancy car for the third time this week. Envy poisons our joy. The antidote, the Dalai Lama explains, is a practice called mudita, or sympathetic joy. It's the ability to rejoice in others' good fortune. When we see someone succeed, instead of feeling diminished, we can say, good for them, just like me. They want to be happy. Mudita recognizes that life is not a zero-sum game. Joy is limitless. The Archbishop adds a simpler remedy: counting your blessings. When you're thankful for what you have, you're less concerned with what you don't. Overcoming these obstacles is the work of a lifetime. But the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop provide us with a toolkit, a set of principles they call the 8 pillars of joy. 4 are qualities of the mind, and 4 are qualities of the heart. The first pillar of the mind is perspective. We've already seen how powerful this is. It's the ability to step back and see a situation from multiple angles. It's recognizing that our limited, self-centered view is not the whole truth. It's seeing the opportunity in the tragedy, the blessing in the curse. It's moving from me to we. As the Archbishop says, when you're stuck in traffic, instead of getting angry, you can look at the other drivers and bless them, imagining the silent struggles they are facing in their own lives. In that moment, your own frustration melts away. The second pillar is humility. These 2 men, who are treated with a level of deference few people on earth will ever experience, are profoundly humble. They see themselves as just one of 7 billion human beings. The Dalai Lama tells a hilarious story about an interfaith meeting where another spiritual leader demanded his chair be placed on bricks so he would be sitting higher than everyone else. The Dalai Lama just sat there thinking, I wish one of those bricks would move, just so he would act like a real human being. Humility, they teach, isn't about thinking less of yourself, it's about thinking of yourself less. It's the recognition that our gifts come from a source greater than ourselves, and that we are all deeply interconnected and dependent on one another. The third pillar is humor. The week of dialogues was filled with constant laughter. They tease each other, they poke fun at themselves, and they use humor as a powerful tool to diffuse tension and speak truth. The Archbishop recalls how during the darkest days of apartheid, humor was a weapon. At funerals for people killed by the police, where the atmosphere was explosive, he would tell self-deprecating jokes to help people release their anger in a positive way. Laughter reminds us of our shared humanity and our shared ridiculousness. It allows us not to take ourselves so seriously. The fourth pillar of the mind is acceptance. This is not resignation or defeat. It is the ability to accept reality as it is, not as we wish it were. This is the only place from which change can begin. You can't change apartheid by pretending it doesn't exist. You have to accept its reality first. The Dalai Lama's practice of accepting the reality of a cancelled flight and using it as an opportunity to meditate is a small example of this profound skill. Acceptance is the sword that cuts through our resistance, allowing us to relax, see clearly, and respond appropriately to life on its own terms. These qualities of the mind prepare us for the 4 qualities of the heart, which are the engine of a joyful life. The fifth pillar, and the first of the heart, is forgiveness. The Archbishop, who chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, has witnessed some of the most extraordinary acts of forgiveness imaginable. He tells the story of mothers whose sons were brutally killed by a traitor from their own movement. In the hearing, one mother threw her shoe at him in anger. But later, during a break, the mothers gathered, and their spokesperson went to him, embraced him, and said, "My child, we forgive you." Forgiveness, they explain, is not about forgetting. It's not about excusing bad behavior. It is about freeing yourself from the past. The Archbishop says, without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person who harmed us. That person will be our jailer. When we forgive, we take back control of our own fate. Forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of immense strength. The sixth pillar is gratitude. Every day, the Dalai Lama says, we should wake up and think, I am fortunate to be alive. I have a precious human life. I am not going to waste it. Gratitude allows us to shift our perspective from what we lack to what we have. It is the ennobling of enjoyment. It's not just eating a meal, it's being thankful for the farmers, the grocers, the cooks, and the earth that made it possible. A researcher on gratitude, Brother David Steindl-Rost, says, it is not happiness that makes us grateful. It is gratefulness that makes us happy. Gratitude allows us to savor each moment before it vanishes. The seventh pillar is compassion. This is the cornerstone of their teachings. A compassionate concern for others' well-being is the source of happiness, the Dalai Lama states simply. Compassion is not just feeling empathy, it's the motivation to relieve another's suffering. If you see someone being crushed by a rock, empathy is getting under the rock with them. Compassion is trying to remove the rock. We are wired for compassion. When we help others, our brain releases endorphins, creating a helper's high. But many of us are afraid of compassion. We're afraid of being overwhelmed by the pain of others. The key is to start with self-compassion, being kind to ourselves, accepting our own frailties and limitations. We cannot love others if we do not first love ourselves. And finally, the eighth pillar is generosity. Generosity is compassion in action. The Archbishop says that when we give, it feels like we are subtracting from ourselves, but in some incredible way, we are actually making space for more to be given to us. He uses the metaphor of the Dead Sea. It receives fresh water from rivers, but it has no outlet. It only takes, it never gives. And so, the water goes bad, and it becomes the Dead Sea. We too shrivel when we only receive and do not give. Generosity is not just about money. We can give our time, our wisdom, our attention, our kindness. When we have a generous spirit, we radiate happiness. We become, as the Archbishop beautifully phrases it, an oasis of peace, a pool of serenity that can ripple out to all those around us. The week of conversations culminates in a birthday celebration for the Dalai Lama at the Tibetan Children's Village, a boarding school for children who have fled Tibet. It's a deeply emotional event. Young children, some as young as 5, share their harrowing stories of escaping over the mountains, leaving their parents behind, perhaps forever. They weep as they speak, and the entire room weeps with them. But then, the Archbishop rises to speak. With the force of a prophet, he looks at these children and tells them, it might not seem possible that you will one day return to a free Tibet, but we in South Africa lived under oppression, and it seemed the chains would never be broken. But it happened. One day you, too, all of you, will see your beloved Tibet. You will be free. One day, you will be dancing and singing in the streets of Tibet, your home country. The children erupt in cheers. The celebration continues with cake, and the children start singing We Are the World. The Archbishop begins to dance his signature, joyful boogie. He coaxes the Dalai Lama to join him. And for the first time in his life, breaking his monastic vows, the Dalai Lama dances. He sways back and forth, a huge smile on his face, as these two old friends hold hands and move to the music, a living embodiment of the joy they have spent a week describing. The final morning is a brief goodbye. We all know this may be the last time they ever see each other. As the Archbishop gets into his car, the Dalai Lama stands by the open window, rubbing his friend's hand. There is sadness in his eyes, but also a deep, unshakable love. He puts his palms together and bows his head in a final gesture of respect. As the car pulls away, he waves brightly, like a child. The message is clear. Joy and sorrow are not opposites. They are woven together, two sides of the same precious fabric of life. To turn toward one is to turn toward the other. The true secret to joy, the one they demonstrated with every laugh, every tear, and every tender embrace, is this: the more we turn away from our own self-regard to wipe the tears from the eyes of another, the more we are able to bear, to heal, and to transcend our own suffering. Commentary. As we close the pages of the Book of Joy, what stays with us is not a complex philosophical system, but the radiant humanity of these two men. Their laughter is infectious, their wisdom is profound, and their friendship is a powerful lesson in itself. The most powerful idea in this book, for me, is the reframing of our life's purpose. We are so often taught to pursue happiness as a goal in itself. We chase achievements, possessions, and experiences, believing that when we get them, then we will be happy. This book gently but firmly turns that logic on its head. Joy is not the destination, it is the byproduct of the journey. It's the unexpected reward we receive when we stop focusing on our own happiness and start focusing on the well-being of others. This isn't just a nice spiritual idea, it's a practical strategy for a better life. The 8 pillars of joy are not abstract virtues for saints and monks. They are skills we can cultivate: perspective, humility, humor, acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, compassion, and generosity. These are muscles of the mind and heart. The more we exercise them, the stronger they become. So, how can we start building these muscles today? It can feel overwhelming, but the beauty of their message is its simplicity. First, try practicing a wider perspective. The next time you feel a surge of frustration, maybe someone cuts you off in traffic, or a friend says something that hurts you, pause, just for a second. Instead of reacting, ask yourself, what might be their story? What pain might they be carrying that caused them to act this way? This small shift can transform anger into a flicker of compassion. Second, cultivate gratitude. Tonight, before you go to sleep, take just 1 minute to think of 3 things that you are genuinely grateful for from your day. It could be something as simple as the warmth of the sun, a kind word from a stranger, or the taste of your favorite food. Writing them down is even more powerful. This simple act trains your brain to look for the good, to notice the abundance that is already present in your life. And third, practice generosity. This doesn't have to mean grand gestures. It can be as simple as a genuine smile to the cashier at the grocery store, offering your full, undivided attention when a friend needs to talk, or doing a small favor for a family member without being asked. The goal is to shift your focus, even for a moment, from what can I get, to what can I give? In a world that often feels fractured by division and clouded by despair, the message of the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Tutu is a beacon of hope. They remind us that our default state is not selfishness, but compassion. We are not wired for conflict, but for connection. And the greatest joy we will ever experience is not in what we acquire for ourselves, but in what we give to each other. That was a summary of the Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We've explored the core of their wisdom today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a photograph of a magnificent feast. You can see the colors and the shapes, but you can't taste the food. The real nourishment comes from sitting down with the book yourself. It's in the quiet moments when one of their stories or a simple turn of phrase lands in a way you didn't expect. This summary is meant to give you a sense of the meal, to help you decide if it's one you want to experience for yourself. If anything we've talked about has sparked something within you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way, you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's continue this journey of growth together.